Welcome to the But First Bible Daily Devotional Podcast with Dave Myers. Our readings for today are 1 Samuel chapters 4 through 6 and Luke chapter 12 verse 35 to 59. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, we see the Ark of God's Covenant captured by the Philistines. This was a gold-plated chest that contained the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. It was a big deal that it was captured. But then in 1 Samuel chapter 5, we see that its presence among the Philistines caused all types of havoc. And so by 1 Samuel chapter 6, the ark was returned to Israel. I want to focus particularly on 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 1 to 5. Verse 1. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. And the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. Well, I've recently read a lot of Dale Ralph Davis's commentaries on Joshua and Judges and have now begun enjoying his commentary on 1 Samuel as well. The following is a short extract with his reflections on 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 1 to 5. Now, just quickly, in it he uses the name Yahweh for the Lord. Yahweh is the name that the Lord revealed himself to Moses in Exodus 3 with. And every time you see Lord, L-O-R-D, in capital letters in the Bible, it's the name Yahweh. So let me read the chapter entitled The Supremacy of Yahweh, chapter 5, verse 1 to 5. The Philistines had captured the ark of Yahweh and had placed it before the image of their god Dagon in Dagon's shrine. One needn't be perceptive to get the point. Here, in the gospel according to the Philistines, was Yahweh, represented by the ark, the defeated God, brought in before Dagon, the victorious God. However, before Wheaties time the next morning, before breakfast the next morning, that's funny, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of Yahweh, verse 3. Now Dagon bows before Yahweh. The master stroke is in the next line, and I think the writer probably had tongue in cheek, twinkle in eye, and acid in ink when he wrote what most matter-of-factly. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. It doesn't sound like a punchline, but imagine a god and they have to stand him back up. What kind of God is that? How would a godly Israelite respond upon hearing this story? With the only pious response, holy, uproarious laughter. It became worse. Next morning, Dagon's head and hands came off when he tried to bow before Yahweh's ark, verse 4. A regular Humpty Dumpty situation with no Elmer's glue. Dagon is simply getting the goodness knocked out of him. Indeed, the Philistines themselves will soon admit that Yahweh has outgodded their God, verse 7. So the defeated God defeats the victorious God on the latter's home turf. What biting humour in verses 1 to 5. Scenarios of Dagon's homage, verses 1 to 3. Dagon's helplessness, verse 3. And Dagon's destruction, verse 4 to 5. Yahweh, however, intends for his people to think, not merely to laugh, to realize that, unlike a battered Dagon, Yahweh doesn't have to have someone come and set him up again. He can fight the Philistines by himself. He doesn't need his people to cheer him on. He will bring back his ark all by himself. Humour, yes, but didactic humour, teaching the self-sufficiency and supremacy of Yahweh. And solemn humour. Don't begin to think, Israel, that you can manipulate the living God like a lucky charm for your own convenience, 1 Samuel chapter 4. And don't begin to think that he needs you to support and carry him. If any carrying is to be done, he will carry you. Look at Isaiah 46, 1-4. It is axiomatic in paganism that the gods are dependent upon man. Part of the old Babylonian Gilgamesh epic contains a flood story. Utnapishtim, who survives the flood in a boat, offers a sacrifice at the end of the ordeal. He relates how the gods smelled the aroma of his sacrifice and drink offering, and how the gods gathered like flies over the sacrificer. If gods and goddesses did not have food and drink supplied by the sacrifices of their devotees, they, like anyone, begin to languish. But with the destruction of mankind during the flood, and with Utnapishtim marooned in the boat for the duration, it has been weeks since the divinities have had a proper meal. Hence their greedy response to Utnapishtim's sacrifice. That is conventional paganism. Note its assumption. The gods depend on man to sustain them. 1 Samuel chapter 5 verse 1-5 is meant to counter such thinking in Israel. Not only does the episode teach the Philistines the supremacy of Yahweh over Dagon, but it instructs Israel that such supremacy is utterly independent of his people. Yahweh is not like Dagon and his kind, a helpless God needing to be cuddled, protected, and sustained by his worshippers. The danger is that contemporary Christians may think that they are not dim-witted pagans, and so, naturally, such matters of humorous and historical interest have nothing to do with them. But the church has its own paganizing mind. What are we to say of songs that croon, "Somehow he needed me"? What poetic ditties that speak of gods having no hands but our hands, no feet but our feet, to do his will? I know there's an element of truth in such sentiments, but it's largely buried. What of the lyrics of our hymns? Rise up, O men of God, his kingdom tarries long, bring in the day of brotherhood, and end the night of wrong. Very stirring, and probably too cocky. I am not saying we should cease serving Yahweh with all our might, but that we must beware of Christian arrogance that casts Yahweh in Dagon's image. The God of the Bible does not need us, and that is good news. Again, see Isaiah chapter 46, verse 1-4. Note, I did not say he does not want us. So good. Until tomorrow, keep trusting Jesus.